Greetings, Blood Bowlers, and welcome to the All or Nuffle podcast, your one-stop shop for all things Blood Bowl. Greetings, Blood Bowlers, and welcome back to a brand new episode of the All or Nuffle podcast. Now, today we're going to be speaking about what I consider to be my second favourite team in the form of the Necromantic Horror. This, as anybody might have seen, I did a TikTok video and basically allowed people to comment and vote who the next podcast was going to be about. I don't know if it's because we're approaching October, so a bit of a spooky season thing, but people voted for Necromantic Horror, and very much like Wood Elves, these are one of the teams that I can talk about, because I really like them. So I figured, why not? So we're going to follow the same formula that we've followed for all of the podcasts so far, where we talk a little bit about the team in a general setting, sort of like, what you can expect from them, sort of play style, what they're good at, what they're not very good at. Then we'll have a little bit of a deep dive into each of the positionals, talking through the cost, all the stats, the skills, as we do every other video. And then we'll talk about some of the lists that you can take for your million gold. Hopefully some lists with a little bit of variety that offer different things, abandoning some positionals altogether in favour of others, things like that. Just, so there's a little bit of something for everyone. I want everyone to look at the setups at the end of an episode and say, right, there's something in there for me, because end of the day, everybody plays every single team differently. There's no set way to play a team. Like, even a team that's not good at passing, if you really wanted to, you could tailor them to do some passing. So, without further ado, let's get into the deep dive. And I think the best way to start when it comes to speaking about the Necromantic Horror, for me, one of the greatest things about Necromantic is they are a fantastic board control team. And what I mean by this, for anybody who's newer to the game, is they're a really good team that allow you to dictate where your players are on the board in relation to your opponents. The reason this is a really valid playstyle is because if you control the board, you can choose where people go, hence meaning you control where the distribution of tackle zones, so your opponent's going to have to roll some dodgers to get past you. And the reason this is so important is, and this is what I tell a lot of new people to Blood Bowl, is the key to winning at Blood Bowl is for you to have to roll as little dice as possible, and for you to make your opponent roll as many as you possibly can. The fewer dice that you roll, the less likely you are to mess something up. The more dice that your opponent has to roll, the more likely they are to mess up. Now, obviously, this is a dice game. There is an element of luck and obviously an element of randomness, but you can put yourself in good stead to be at an advantage. And board control teams help massively with this. If you can keep the tackle zones of your team distributed where you like them by manipulating the position of your team, whether that be when blocked or in your own movement or after you've blocked yourself, anything like that, you are perfectly primed for the thing I just raised of you rolling as little dice as possible and getting your opponent to roll more. The reason the Necromantic are so good at this comes down to two skills alone, really. No, I've got three skills. I was going to save them for when we go through the skills, but considering we're talking about playstyle, I will speak about them now. These skills in question are Stand Firm, Sidestep, and Foul Appearance. So, Foul Appearance, when you go to target somebody that's got the Foul Appearance skill, or trait, should I say, with a block, you have to roll a d6. If you roll a 1, your activation ends, and you do not get to do the block. Your player is too scared of the opponent to commit to the block. The reason this is probably one of the less board control skills, but I personally think it does lean into it. If somebody's failing that, you're not going anywhere. That guy is staying exactly where he wants to stay. And, that is in itself essentially board control. Now, the other skill that I consider to be board control is sidestep. Now, anybody that is not sure what sidestep is, when this player gets blocked with a push result, instead of the person who pushed them getting to choose one of 3 squares behind them to go into, a person with sidestep can move into any vacant square in their own tackle zone. So you get to choose where you get pushed in any of the 7 squares around you that is available for you to move into. Obviously, this is board control because if your opponent's pushing you, they're pushing you in a direction that they believe is beneficial to them. So if you can disturb that, you're either going to get in the way of their plans, or you might even have your own plan and say, no, I'm not going the way he wants me to go. If I go here, I keep this channel blocked. He's not going to be able to run through without rolling any dice or blitzing me, using his blitz action, things like that. Yeah, sidestep's a really good one. It allows you to manipulate where you go after being pushed, so you have the say on where that player's tackle zone, sits on the board. And the final one for board control on this team is stand firm. Stand firm is it's very simple. It's literally, if somebody does a push action to you, you can just say, no, I'm not going anywhere. It's your choice. It's not an automatic skill. If somebody blocks a player with stand firm and they get a push result, you can choose to use stand firm or not. You can choose not, meaning you might notice in terms of board control, right, if I let this person push me back, that's actually going to be beneficial to me because my tackle zone covers this area then, or again, you might say, no, actually, I would like to use stand firm because it's important that my tackle zone stays here. Like, in thinking about all this in the realm of board control. So yeah, there are a couple of extra skills that you would maybe dish out. Yeah, you would probably dish out to improve board control on this team. I would maybe throw some grab in there. If you give somebody grab, it's basically grab is reverse sidestep. So with sidestep, when you get pushed, you can choose where you go. If you've got grab when you push somebody, you can choose where they go. Instead of like choosing one of 3 squares behind the person you blocked, you can choose where they go. So that becomes like, a double-edged sword. You can hit them on both sides. You can not only choose where your players are going when they get pushed, you get to choose where their players are going when you get pushed. That would really step up the board control for the Necromantic Horror. Now, although for me personally, the board control is one of the things that I enjoy most about the Necromantic Horror, it is not the only thing that they're good at. The Necromantic Horror have the privilege of having what I consider to be the single best positional in all of Blood Bowl in the form of the Werewolf. I'm not going to go into too much detail about its stats and its skills, but the Werewolf is absolutely phenomenal. It's really expensive, but I always max out on Werewolves when I'm playing Necromantic Horror where I can. Often in exchange for dropping other positionals completely out on my roster just because I really want those Werewolves. Like I say, without going into too much detail, we're going to deep dive into each of the positionals in a little while. The reason I love the Werewolves is the skills that they start out with are great. They've got fantastic stats. And all it takes is an extra skill or two in any direction, whether that's giving them strip ball to turn them into a cage breaker or something like that. You might want to stick a block on there to improve that survivability. Any skill you want to give them to send them in a different direction in terms of their role, like I say, whether it is a cage diver or whatever, it really does only take that extra 1 or 2 skills for them to be fantastic because the skills that they've already got are great. I love the speed. I love the armor. Their agility is not terrible, but we'll get into that a little bit later. So yeah, I think that's the main reason I love them is the board control and the fact that they have on their roster, for me, the best positional in the game. In terms of play style, what you can expect from the Necromantic Horror is you are not going to be doing a great deal of passing. Out of the 5 players that you can take on a roster, 3 of them don't have a passing ability stat at all, and the 2 that do have them have a 4+. 4+ isn't terrible. It's a 50% chance of succeeding. However, the moment that you go anywhere beyond a quick pass and you start getting those minus modifiers for the distance of the throw, passing becomes something that you save for desperate situations. These are a fantastic team to cage with, in my opinion. We've got some strength 4 players in here that you could put on the corners of your cage, make the front of your cage really strong. Place either a ghoul runner or a werewolf as the ball carrier in the middle and just inch your way up the field. And then, because we've got some players with high movement, you don't have to inch your way very far up the field before you can hopefully make a break for it. And, maybe a couple of rushes or go for it, depending on which mindset you are and what that should be called. Maybe score. I think you probably, if you were lucky and things went your way and you set up right, you could quite easily score a second turn touchdown with Necromantic, just based on movement and some of the strength they've got, to be able to punch people out of the way and things like that. So yeah, they have a perfect balance of speed. You've got some guys who are much slower on the team. Then you've got some who are as fast as they come in the game. Armor-wise, it's relatively high, to be fair. On average, it's quite a bit higher than a lot of other teams. As I said, you're not going to be doing much passing. The running is good. The caging capability is, for me, fantastic. Very much needs somebody with, in my opinion, this is just my opinion, I could be wrong. For me, this team very much needs somebody in that board control mindset. Because for me, this team is easy enough to score with, which sounds really big-headed, but I promise you, if you set up right and a couple of rolls go your way and a couple of rolls don't go your opponent's way, you can score quick and fast and regularly. The issue for this team is the defending. And the reason for the issue with the defending is, I believe that you have to have the board control mindset when you're defending with this team. Don't get me wrong, if you're not if you're not centered around board control, you can still defend. They're not terrible at it. They've got enough speed and enough strength to be able to cope with different types of opponents, breaking through and things like that. It really isn't the end of the world if you're not board control minded with this team. I just think that this team really comes alive defensively and really comes into its own defensively when you operate around the idea of board control. And maybe board control is something that we'll talk about in an episode in and of its own, because it's another thing that I could talk for a long time, because it's one of the most interesting aspects and playstyles of Blood Bowl for me. So yeah, that's what you can expect from the Necromantic Horror team as a whole. Like I say, very much a tier 2 team. In fact, for me, they're probably the quintessential tier 2 team. Yep, they've got the fast guys. Yep, they've got the strong guys. But they cancel each other out. The fast guys aren't as strong, and the strong guys aren't as fast. Really interesting team. Not to mention, and I'm going to say it, I think they probably have the best minis in all of Blood Bowl. Like, you got the werewolves that are in those super cool sprinting poses. You've got the flesh golems that look like big Frankenstein guys. You've got the ghosts, which are like bed sheets attached to washing lines. Then we've got all the linemen. Some of them are scarecrows. Some of them have got pumpkins for heads. And then the ghoul runners, which have also got pumpkins for heads. Just visually a fantastic team, like the Halloween team. I know we do have other teams in there, such as Shambling Undead, and now Vampires, which you could say are a Halloween team, but Necromantic are definitely the quintessential Halloween team in terms of visuals. So now we've done a bit of a quick team overview on a more general scope, let's get into the roster and let's see which players you can take and what they are going to bring to your team. So, as always, we start with the linemen. On the Necromantic Horror team, you can take 16 linemen if you so wish. Your linemen are called zombie linemen. They're going to cost you 40k, so super, super cheap on the lineman front. They can only move 4, which, is understandable. I know the Shambling Undead zombie linemen are also 4. I think the idea is, as opposed to new age zombies that can sprint and climb up stuff and things like that. These are very much your reanimated corpse, sort of like shuffling along sort of zombies. So, on a thematical sense, the 4 movement makes sense. Strength 3, we know by now this is average and pretty much the benchmark of a lineman in Blood Bowl, unless you're playing Stunty or something like that. Agility 4 plus, not amazing, not terrible, 50% chance. No passing ability whatsoever, and 9 armor. This is not a bad lineman at all. Going to set you back 40k. Yep, it's really slow. It's got the standard strength for a lineman. It can have a go at picking the ball up or doing anything agility orientated with that 50% chance of dodging or picking up the ball or anything like that. And it's quite strong. It's got 9 plus. Not bad at all. On top of that, they get no skills barring regeneration, which, as we know, if they suffer an injury, you roll a d6, you roll a 1, 2, 3. They suffer the injury as normal. 4, 5, 6, they just appear in your reserves. So yeah, they've got 9 armor, which is definitely nothing to sniff at. And then if that armor's broken and they get injured and there's a casualty, there's a chance that they just completely ignore it anyway. So in terms of skill access, their primary access is general. So you're going to be giving these guys your block, your kick, things like that. Secondary of agility and strength, which is exactly what you expect. It can't have passing skills because it has no passing ability at all. So there were no chance there was going to be a P in either of these columns. General as primary, secondary, agility, strength. That is exactly what you would expect looking at that stat line. So when we move on from the zombie lineman, we come to the ghoul runner. You can take a maximum of 2 of these ghoul runners. They're going to set you back a hefty 75k. They're going to move you up the field 7 movement, which, as we know by now, is above average and is solid movement. 3 damage, 3 strength, 3 plus agility, so slightly better agility than the lineman. 4 plus passing, 8 plus armor. And they start by default with the dodge skill. Now, I actually think that this is a really, really affordable, no, not affordable, justifiable positional. Like, you can take 2. I would always max out on 2 of these guys if I were you. For 75k, which for a positional is not that expensive. It's more expensive than the lineman we just spoke about, which is why I said quite expensive, because it's a big jump up from the 40k from the lineman. But as far as positionals go, 75k is not that expensive, and you're getting movement 7 for that. Agility 3 plus, which is the best it gets on the Necromantic Horror team. It's one of the only positions that can pass on this team. Yep, it's got armor 8, so it's quite weak, and it starts with the dodge skill as default. That's great, and you want to be taking the maximum of these, because these are the guys that are going to be scoring for you, along with the werewolves. But the werewolves are even more so expensive than that, and for good reason. But we'll get onto that shortly. The Ghoul Runner has got access to agility in general in terms of skills for the primary, and that's exactly what you expect. It's going to have access to general because most positionals do. And this guy's got dodge, he's got agility 3 plus and movement 7, which just tells you this is a fast guy, so he's naturally going to have access to agility. Straight away, first skill I'm giving this guy as soon as he gets to 6 SPP is I'm going to dip into that primary general and give him block. And then I've got myself a movement 7 blodger. And what a blodger is, essentially, for anybody that is unsure, is that is a player that has got dodge and block, which means that they ignore 2 of the results on the blocking dice, meaning that only the POW, the unaltered, unchanging POW, is the only thing that can knock them down. And given the fact that we've got a armor 8, we want to keep this guy stood up as much as we possibly can, because people are not going to struggle to break armor 8 plus. In terms of secondaries, this is one of the players that can access passing skills. If you did want to make this more of a passing team, you could do that. We could save up some SPP, dip into that passing thing, give him accurate, which means, he's ignoring -1 modifiers for short passes and things like that, or even give him the pass skill so he gets a free reroll when he fails a passing attempt, things like that. And he also has access to strength as a secondary. Now, for me, off the top of my head, I'm not really sure what sort of skills I'm giving this guy from the strength category. Maybe just in terms of, again, board control and assisting. Maybe you give him guard just on the off chance that he's stood around somewhere and he can provide an assist, something like that. Yeah, that's actually quite a tough one. You wouldn't want to give him anything like Mighty Blow because this is a guy you want to, as much as you can, keep out of, the rough and tumble. So now that's the Ghoul Runners. We're going to move on to the Wraiths. For me, the Wraiths are a massive point of contention when it comes to the Necromantic Horror team. And I get quite a little bit of, backlash from people when I tell them that these are the positional that I am willing to drop almost immediately in exchange for the other ones. Now, I'll explain why in a little bit, but let's first go through the stat line. So 95k, they're going to cost you. You can take a maximum of 2, 6 movement, which we know is average, strength 3, average, agility 3+, not terrible, no passing ability whatsoever, and 9+ armor. So right now you're thinking, Baz, why don't you like them? So far, so good. Let's talk through skills. Block, can ignore a both down on blocking dice. We know that's good. Foul appearance, we spoke about at the beginning. When somebody wants to block them, they have to roll a d6. If they roll a 1, they cannot block them. The activation ends. Regeneration, we know is great for survivability. You can ignore casualties. And sidestep, which we spoke about at the beginning, which means that you essentially get to choose where your player goes when they get pushed. Now you're probably thinking, why? Like, what have I got against them? Because they all sound great. And now there's one trait I have not told you about that they've got. They've got no hands. And that means that under no circumstances can they carry, intercept, or pick up the ball. Any attempt to do any of that will result in an automatic turnover because they have the no hands trait. Now, maybe I'm coming down a little bit too hard on them, but for me, if I've got 11 players on the pitch, I want every single one of those players, if push comes to shove, to be able to have a go at picking up the ball. And, I get why people, I totally understand the other mindset of like, I'm willing to sacrifice 2 players being able to pick up the ball in exchange for that sweet block, foul appearance, sidestep, all that business. I get it. I do get it, but it's just not for me. That's just my mindset. In terms of development, they get access to general and strength as primary. This is maybe something you would have guard on because of the block and the no hands. You're not going to be doing any ball carrying, so why not turn them into a bit of a blitzer and an assister? Secondary is agility, which I don't really understand, but they've got to have a secondary thingy. They've got to have a secondary level for the skills. And general and strength, considering this is the one that they kind of want to be the blitzer, is going to make more sense. So it just leaves that agility had to be secondary, is what I think. Because for me, the fact that it's agility 3, it's movement 6, which we know is about average, and it's got sidestep, I think that maybe it should have had GSA as primary, but they can't give it P in secondary because it can't pass. It can't hold the ball. So I think that's probably why agility fell down into that secondary category there. So that is my thoughts on the Wraith. And now we move on to the Werewolf. The best positional in the entire game. Now get ready for your eyes and your wallet, or your Blood Bowl wallet, to water when I tell you that we can only take 2 of these and they're going to set you back 125k each. That is the same as a Wood Elf Tree Man. That's how much these guys are going to cost you. You can take 2, so you could potentially be taking up 250k, a quarter of your budget on a 1 mil team, just on werewolves. But I assure you, it is well justified. Movement 8, which, as we know, although it's not the highest like the 9 that the Gutter Runner and the Stilty players in the Scotland team have, 8 is exceptional movement. Exceptional. Coming in at 3 strength. So the strength's not that impressive. It's pretty much, the bog standard across the board. Agility 3+, which, as we know, is as good as it gets on the Necromantic Horror team. Passing ability 4+, so it's one of the only 2 players on the team that can actually attempt to pass. Armor value 9+. Now, the stat line bar in the movement is not very appetizing. Like, I'm sure reading that out to you, you're thinking, am I seriously paying 125k just for movement 8? And yes, it looks like that at the minute. But when we get to the skills, this is where it comes into its own for me. And maybe I'm just fangirling a little bit. Maybe it's not as good as it's not as actually good as I'm making out, and people are going to hear it and think it's a little bit lackluster. But for me, I love it. Coming in with claws. Claws is a fantastic skill. Essentially, if your player has claws and they block somebody, they automatically break armor on an 8+, regardless of the armor. That means if a werewolf knocks down a tree man and he goes to roll armor, he doesn't have to roll the usual 11+, he just has to roll an 8, like he's hitting a wood elf lineman. If you're attacking a black orc that's got armor 10+, nope, you don't need to roll 10+, just 8+, like you're hitting anybody that's a lineman usually. Absolutely crazy, fantastic skill. Amazing for bringing down big guys if you can get those assists to make sure that you're not rolling uphill dice blocks and things like that. Not only does it have that, but it has frenzy. So if on the first attempt of hitting somebody, you don't manage to knock them down and make use of your claws, you get to follow up and have a second free attempt. Just be mindful when using frenzy that you do take into account assists that surround you on both occasions. So you might start out with the first block being a 2 dice block, but when you push them back, you may follow up into an area where they get some extra assists and it could turn into a 1 dice block, or indeed a 2 dice block and your opponent chooses the result. So just be mindful of that. You always kind of, again, this is one of those skills you have to think a little bit into the future with. But if you can make use of it, it's an absolutely fantastic skill. And they also have regeneration, as do a few of the different people on this team, which is great for survivability. Now, the reason the werewolf is so good, in my opinion, is that it's got access to agility and general, which are the 2 that you want to give it, because let's face it, you want to give it block, you want to give it dodge, turn this guy into an absolute monster. Again, I did mention at the beginning of the episode, you might want to use some strip ball in there. That's another good one if you want to make this guy perfectly equipped for smashing into the corner of a cage. With that follow-up on frenzy as well, you can even, completely disrupt a cage and create a gap for other people to move in. Things like that, maybe even leap. I know I gave some werewolves leap in a league, maybe last year before, or in a tournament, sorry, and it was absolutely fantastic. Like, people totally ignored the fact that I had a movement 8-piece with leap, turn 1, while defending. I were running up or positioning them on the line, jumping straight over one of their players. Fair enough, on the odd occasion having to use a reroll because, it's a little bit tricky to do the agility roll when it comes to leaping. But get lucky, and I'm straight. I've got 2 movement 8 werewolves straight in their backfield within 3 squares of the ball immediately. Like, amazing. This player is so versatile. You can do so much with it, and you can tailor it to be whatever you want. But even without that, the baseline skills are just, for me, Claws and Frenzy is just an absolutely fantastic duo. Like, I get to break your armor on an 8+, but if I fail to knock you down the first time, I get a second attempt. And I'm movement 8. Brilliant. Fantastic. Secondary access is passing and strength, which I understand. Movement 8, agility as a primary. This very much leans into being an agility player, so it wouldn't make sense that strength is a secondary skill, and passing is not at the forefront of your mind when you're playing Necromantic, so it makes sense that that's a secondary as well. And finally, we move on to the Flesh Golem. So the Flesh Golem, you can take 2 of them. They are rather similar to the mummies on the Shambling Undead team, except they're not quite as strong. They look like little Frankenstein guys. Movement 4, 115k each. So even then, you can take 2 strength 4 players in the form of Flesh Golems, and it would still be cheaper than taking 2 werewolves. That's how expensive werewolves are. So yeah, the Flesh Golem are movement 4, strength 4, agility 4+, no passing ability, and armor 10+. Coming in with a regeneration skill, as we already know about, makes him a bit more survivable if he does get a casualty. Stand firm, meaning he can refuse to be pushed back, and thick skull, which means he's more likely to stay on the pitch when it comes to rolling an injury roll. Now, this is quite expensive for a four strength player. Only movement 4, so he can't move very far. His agility is about 50% chance of succeeding. His armor is 10 plus, so his survivability is good. And as we spoke about at the beginning, stand firm is a great board control. And it really, really pisses off your opponent. Like, if your opponent sat there and sort of like planned out their turn, as some people do, rather than working on the fly, a lot of people will look at it like a chessboard and say, right, move this here, move that there, and sort of like plan out a chain of events in the head. And then if they've not accounted for that stand firm and they go to push him back and you say, oh, stand firm, I'm not going anywhere, it really, really frustrates people. So yeah, maybe I would have made him a little bit cheaper. I'm not sure if strength 4 and armor 10 plus justifies 115k. I wouldn't make him much less expensive. Maybe just knock 10k off. Maybe that's the difference between getting some extra dedicated fans or some cheerleaders when you're drafting your team. In terms of skill access, he's got access to general and strength, which is exactly what you would expect from a strength 4 piece. This guy, for me personally, if you're going to give, I know we did speak about giving the wraiths some guard, but these are the guys that you're going to want to give it to, if you ask me, because the strength 4, so 9 times out of 10, you're going to set these guys up on your line of scrimmage when it comes to setup. So if you can position these guys sporadically across your line of scrimmage with other guys in between them, and they've both got guard, you're going to be 2 dice blocking like you would not believe on the line of scrimmage. That is exactly what you want. So yeah, that's probably the go-to for me in terms of strength. General, maybe block, something like that, or even fend. So double up stand firm and fend, because stand firm, if you turn around and say, you know what, I will let you push me back, but because of fend, you're not allowed to follow up. So you get a benefit regardless of whether you choose to use stand firm or not. If you choose to use stand firm, you're not going anywhere. It's your choice. You're not moving. But if you do decide to let them push you back, you can also turn around and say, I've got fend. You can't follow me, though. So yeah, you know what? That actually just came into the top of my head for this episode. That's not something I do. I've not used that before, but that were a little bit of flicker of genius, because that's fantastic. Yeah, in terms of secondary agility, obviously passing is not going to be anywhere in there because he does not have a passing ability stat, so we're always going to be agility. Your stronger guy is not going to have as easy access to agility as some of your other teams would. So that's a bit of a deep dive into each positional. I hope so many of you agree with me that the werewolf sounds fantastic. Maybe I'm looking at it through rose-tinted glasses because they've done absolute bits for me in leagues and tournaments. But for me, they are absolutely fantastic. And they are expensive, but I just think it's justified. Again, I could be looking at that through the lens of, I'll pay 125k for them because they won me a league or they won me a tournament. Like, maybe so. And maybe I'm being too harsh on the Wraiths. But yeah, that's just my opinion about all the different teams. Obviously, everybody's different. If you hate werewolves and like Wraiths, fantastic. Build your team however you like. And talking of building teams, let's have a quick look through some of the options that we can take when it comes to building teams. So the first one we're going to do is we're going to do a build where we do not make use of the golems. The golems are the strength 4 guys that we just spoke about last. If you don't take any of those guys, you can take 2 wraiths, the ghosty guys, 2 werewolves, 2 ghouls, 5 zombies, and 3 rerolls, and you will be sitting at exactly 1 million gold. Now, again, for me, I don't really like the raves. I don't really like the wraiths. They're just not my cup of tea. For me, I would prefer to find a way where I can take flesh golems over wraiths. But again, that really is just me. This is not a bad build at all, though. If you are willing to sacrifice strength for the 2 players with block in the form of the wraiths, and you want that extra reroll, because for me, 2 is the minimum. So when I say the extra reroll, I mean the 3. This is not a bad build, and it's perfectly 1 million gold. Like, chef's kiss. Like, it's a perfect list. You get that extra, the safety blanket of 3 rerolls. You've taken some fantastic positionals, missing out on that strength 4. However, if you were to play this in a league and you were making sure that your first purchase was going to be a flesh golem, you'd be absolutely laughing. This would be an absolutely fantastic list. Let's have another look at the next one. Where are we at now? This one. This is the list for me, 1,000%. The no Wraith list. Hear me out. 1 werewolf, 2 flesh golems, 2 ghouls, 7 zombies, 3 rerolls, and that will sit you at 995k. Yeah, 995k. So slightly under budget. Not that you can spend that 5k on anything, but it's slightly under budget. We get 1 werewolf. We can save up for that second one very soon. Or if you did want to bring wraiths in a little bit later on, you can do that. But we've got that best positionally in the game werewolf. 2 golems, so we've got some extra strength in there, as well as that board control from Stand Firm. 2 ghoul runners, movement 7, some extra agility. We've got a werewolf and 2 ghoul runners here. We've got some serious potential to be scoring. Like, it's crazy. 7 zombies, which is slightly higher than what most teams you would take for most linemen in teams, but it is what it is. And 3 rerolls, again, were slightly above that bare minimum benchmark that I would have as 2 rerolls. So you've got that extra safety blanket. This is an absolutely fantastic. For me, this is the best league list, in my opinion. You get that werewolf, you get that strength 4 in the form of the golems, and you've got 2 more players that are movement 7. Fantastic. And this is a fantastic build to build on, literally. Save up for them wraiths if that's not your cup of tea. Save up for the extra werewolf. And again, like the last list, you will be absolutely laughing for real. So this is a little bit faster than I anticipated, to be fair. Let's find the next list. And this is... I built this list to be impartial. But I don't agree with the list. Because this is the no werewolf list. We are talking no werewolves at all, 2 wraiths, 2 golems, 2 ghouls, 5 zombies, and 3 rerolls. However, this one does leave you at a team value of 990k. So you have still got 10k that you can put into maybe buying extra dedicated fans, maybe buy a cheerleader, maybe buy assistant coach, so you get some benefits there. This is not the list for me, personally. I just, again, it could just be rose-tinted glasses because I've had such success with my past. But I am not passing up on werewolves. I'm not starting a necromantic horror team and not having any werewolves at all. That's just not happening. But if werewolves are something you don't want to start out with, and there's something that you're prepared to save up all your gold for, this is not a bad team. You've got the board control and the wraiths and the golems in the form of Stand Firm and Sidestep and all that business. So you've still got that board control, and you've got the speed of 7 movement from the ghouls, as well as 5 zombies. And again, that extra reroll, rather than the 2, you get the 3. Safety blanket, you can make some more daring decisions knowing that you've got an extra reroll spare to potentially bail you out. Again, this is not the list for me, but when we're talking about these different lists for all these teams, I try to build teams that aren't really my cup of tea, just in case there's anybody out there who is it and says, oh yeah, I don't like werewolves, that's my list. That's what I would run. So yeah, trying to remain impartial and not hold the wolves as too much of a favoritism. Let's see. Max positionals. So this is very similar to the one where we dropped the golems at the beginning, but we are dropping the golems. No, not the golems. Sorry, the wraiths. Sorry, where we dropped the wraiths. And in exchange for that, we drop the wraiths, lose a reroll, but we get that second werewolf. 2 golems, so we've got 2 strength 4 players. We've got 2 werewolves, the best players in the game, and 2 ghouls, followed by 5 zombies and 2 rerolls. Now, 2 rerolls is nothing to sniff at, as people know already, because I won't stop saying it. That is my absolute bare minimum in terms of rerolls, in my opinion. You get access to 2 werewolves from the get-go, 2 golems. Bear in mind, the golems and the werewolves are the 2 most expensive players on this team, and 2 ghouls, meaning that if you did want to max out on your positionals and get those wraiths, you're only having to save up 95k each for those wraiths to complete your team fully. Not only that, but this team only sits at 970k. So you've got 30k left to play with and put into all those valuable things. Cheerleaders, assistant coaches, things like that. I think probably, despite saying that the list earlier where you get 3 rerolls and 1 werewolf is my list. I think this is probably my list, really. Getting those 2 werewolves is just too appealing. I think this would be my list. And like I say, I don't like the Wraiths. However, if you did find halfway through a league that board control was becoming an issue, or players were getting killed too easily, bringing in 2 players that are going to cost you 95k each with some block and some board control is going to be a breath of fresh air into your team if you have been struggling. Not only that, for me personally, if it's 970k and I've got 30k left to spend, I'm putting all 3 of those into dedicated fans. It just means that my winnings are going to be higher from the get-go, meaning I'm close to buying those Wraiths if that is something that I want to do. So let's have a look at the next one. Oh no, we don't have a next one. All I did was accidentally copy and paste the first one. So yeah, those are all the lists that you can take for the Necromantic Horror. Obviously, this is not a definitive selection. You can build your team. You can take 11 linemen if you want. Take 11 zombies. Do it. It'll be terrible, but do it. You know, I just like to build a variety of different lists, chuck them all together in the hopes that there is something in there, that everybody from all different mindsets and all different favourable playstyles will enjoy. So, this has been the deep dive on the Necromantic Horror team, and I hope you have enjoyed it. These are a team that are very close to my heart, not quite as close as Wood Elves. They were the second ever team I bought after buying the second season box. And yeah, if you play these guys right and lean into what they're good at, you can cause some absolute terror in leagues and tournaments. And if you do that, I would be more than happy for you to drop a comment or reach out to me on TikTok and tell me all about it, because there are a few things that warm my heart more than listening to people tell me how they've absolutely destroyed teams with those werewolves, because I'm a fanboy. But yeah, thank you very much for listening, guys. I'm not sure who the next episode is going to be on. I'll have to have a think, maybe do another TikTok vote. But in the meantime, you guys take care. Thank you very much for listening to this episode of All or Nuffle, and I will speak to you all very soon. Take care, guys.